Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cunningham Township Board for Monday, July 8th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu, Mr. Evans,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Ms. Colasetti,
Here.
Ms. Bishop, Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry, Mayor Marlin,
Here.
Supervisor Chenoweth,
Present.
Assessor Owana.
Here.
Thank you.
And let the record reflect Town Board Member Chandra Bishop has arrived. Next item, approval of minutes. We have no minutes attached for this month. Are there any additions to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Presentations. There is no one in the audience for public participation. We'll move on to the committee to verify bills.
Good evening. So this last month, I just want to point out it was a closeout grant month, so you will see large numbers as we completed various grants at the end of the year. The town fund, we spent $80,117.02. In the general assistance fund, we spent $235,678.70, and the total was $315,795.72. You have a full bills report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? James.
Yeah, I have two questions about the bills. I noticed that in several positions, it looks like there were two payrolls on the same day for some staff.
So my guess, if we look at the payrolls on the same day, is they're divided across classes, because some staff members are classed to two different grants, and so we actually have to operate them. Is there a
Okay,
specific
they're in the
payroll?
assessor's office.
Oh, okay.
Can you point out specifically what you're?
Yep, I'm pulling it up here. Look at the first,
Oh, I see what you're looking at.
yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so Jada Harris on the,
I can
on the
explain.
7th got both $1,675 and $2,500.
Yes, that's because there's one regular paycheck and then all of our employees receive bonuses. It was one bonus distributed across two paychecks, and that's the two that you see listed in here on the payroll. The bonuses were for one, it being the end of the fiscal year, and two, we have just concluded our reassessment year, and we always distribute bonuses at that time.
Okay, so the question I have also is that, is that a general township practice to pay bonuses at the end of the fiscal year?
We specifically have it with the end of the reassessment year. It happens to be aligned with our fiscal year, so that's why we do it at that time.
Okay, what about, there were also similar payments like that in December.
Those were bonuses as well, smaller bonuses.
So how is it determined, do you have a policy or practice for determining how a bonus is paid, or is it paid regardless?
Well, I mean, we do pay bonuses regardless because people do have to have increases in their paychecks. As one, they become more accredited. We go by how long you've had your CIAO, which stands for Certified Illinois Assessing Officer Accreditation. That's essentially what you need to function for a property tax office. We also go by how much experience you have practically in your office, whether that be within our office or with other offices, any previous jobs people have worked. And then we also break it down by need.
Okay,
And we do make it very clear to all of our employees, and we're all in the same room when we discuss this, so everyone is aware as far as the need goes, how it's distributed.
so someone may say they have a financial burden or something, and you determine the bonus based on that?
Sometimes that is a portion of it, yes. And
Okay.
we are aware of everyone's specific situation in our office, as we only have about 4 people outside of myself working there.
And that's been a practice all along,
By all along, how long do you mean?
as long as you've been there, I guess?
Yes, as long as I've been there and even further.
Okay. Does the supervisor's office pay bonuses?
No, the only time we have paid out is during cure reimbursements, we were able to reimburse people's cell phone usage. So we processed it as a bonus in payroll, but it was actually for our actual expenses incurred.
So like a stipend?
It was, yeah, essentially,
Communications.
we had additional dollars to cure money, and so we were able to stipend. I think it was $300 a person, and it was flat for each person. They got exactly the same amount.
Okay.
I would
And so-
also, oh, I'm sorry. May I offer a specific comment? I'd also like to offer that specifically within the assessor's office, it's not very common to find people who understand property tax and who are willing to work for a jurisdiction as small as ours. So by paying out people these bonuses, not only is that an incentive to continue to stay in our office with their continued knowledge, not only of property tax, but of Cunningham Township specifically, but otherwise that money would just go to some program that otherwise would have to be a resource to help us do our job. We simply need the people who are in the office. We need their intellect. Specifically, we need their intellect. So these bonuses, in my eyes, yes, are necessary continually to make
Thank
sure
you.
that they stay.
Thank you for filling me in on that.
No problem.
And then the other question I had is, we have a travel item on here for Wayne Williams, reimbursement for travel. Is Wayne a full-time employee of the township?
No, he is not officially a full-time employee, but he does work full-time hours essentially as of late. We're going to have to revisit within our fiscal year 25 budget what the situation is, given that, one, we had somebody that was initially going to come on full-time, and they very suddenly told me just a few weeks ago that they are no longer going to do that, someone who was already involved with property tax for approximately 3 years. So that kind of changes things. And additionally, we have recently needed to move another full-time employee to part-time, as they have now gotten a different job, making them move to Chicago. So it's a little bit difficult in that Wayne has stepped up immensely in needing to supplement some of that work that needs to be supplemented in the office, given that change in situation that occurred very suddenly. So no, he is not officially full-time, I suppose you could say, but like, yes, he does function with full-time hours as of late, specifically because of how busy we've been concluding reassessment year.
Okay, and how long has he been doing that?
I would say approximately through May, maybe even March.
Okay, so when he traveled for us back in September, was he working full-time for us then?
No, he was not working full-time for us then, but I still do offer specific stipends to people who are traveling for the purpose of going to assessor-related either classes or events. And specifically, as we lost that person who was initially going to be coming on, there was room within our travel budget for him to be reimbursed for a class specifically that we had discussed earlier on in the fiscal year. I told him, hey, this is a risk that you're going to have to take in terms of paying for this, but if there's money left over within our budget, because it is directly related to things that we need within our assessment office, I will reimburse you for it if it's available at the end of the year. And he said, that's okay, I'll take that risk. And I said, okay.
So my understanding is he works for the assessor's office in Cook County.
Yes.
Have you talked with Cook County about splitting the costs for travel relating to assessor's duties, so that since he's their full-time employee?
Yeah, they do predominantly front the cost. This was one cost that I specifically have allowed him to have, in addition to costs that are related to the IAAO Illinois chapter specific membership, which is approximately $50, $60 a year. And if he goes to any of those events to represent our office in Chicago specifically, I will reimburse for that travel.
Okay. I just wanted to ask the question because I can tell you that in many public service organizations, if you're working full-time, multiple jobs, you have to disclose that, and there's usually a practice associated with that. I'm guessing we don't have a disclosure practice for the township for being employed full-time outside of your regular job.
So the supervisor's position is that essentially if someone would like to work outside of the hours, they're able to do so, but they need to disclose to me that they're doing that work. And so we have some people who do 5 to 10 hours of contractor jobs outside of it, but we're very strict in terms of the time that they do that work. The folks in my office, even those who are salaried, actually clock in and out so that we have clear time cards for every single person, whether they're salaried or hourly. That way, because for some reason, people have a habit of FOIAing our time cards. And so I've been very clear about making sure that all the time cards are up to date and that we can quantify everyone's work. So that is the supervisor's practice.
All right, thank you. I can tell you, as a University of Illinois employee, we have a process called the reporting of non-university activities that everybody has to go through, even for work like this, where we have to disclose both for conflict of interest reasons and for, I assume, if there was a problem, for documentation of how much time somebody is doing inside and out work. I want to make it clear, I have no concerns about someone using their time to work multiple jobs. People in all segments of our economy do that, and some have to. I just wanted to make sure that we have a process, even if it's informal, of disclosure so that everybody's aware of what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the Town Fund and General Assistance Fund?
So moved.
Moved by Grace. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jaya. Further discussion? The clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Woken?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. We'll move on to reports of officers.
Yes, I just had a couple of updates for the town board. Fred Grosser, who has been our township attorney, is retired. So he submitted his retirement. I met with the assessor's office, and we are looking, because the level of legal support we need is more complex as we've grown. We actually need people who know tenant rights, people who know immigrant rights, folks who know property taxes, folks who know township code. It's really it's a variety of needs. We are currently prospecting the different needs. Now, it may be that we can find one company that does it all, but my guess is that we won't. I want the town board to have access to an attorney so that you can request an attorney. It is still on demand, so if you were to demand an attorney or request an attorney tomorrow, I would make sure that you had someone. We do have several folks that we work with who have experience in government. But I just wanted to let you know formally that Fred had retired right after the notice of the Carl case. The Carl case has a few loose ends, and I'm receiving all of the documentation around that as supervisor, as transition, and I'm looking for legal support. The second I wanted to announce is that the budget process, as I had mentioned, because we submitted our grant applications, we pretty much have all of our notifications back about what we will be receiving. So we should be bringing you a budget in August for confirmation in September. I'll work with the clerk's office to make sure there's proper notice. I'm hoping it doesn't impact the dates of our calendar. We might have to have a special meeting, but we'll see if we can avoid that if possible. Let's see. I think there was a request from James that the budget conversation, I'm assuming the first conversation, be an hour long. So we can put the budget in your packet, and I forwarded that to the chair, the mayor, about having an hour-long meeting. That is certainly fine with our office. And then in terms of the supervisor's memo, I just want to mention, as we do the budget, we have a couple of challenges. The general assistance rate has gone up. We're almost at 100 general assistance cases, which is probably the highest we've been since COVID. And we have significant rental assistance. I've met with the managers of both of those programs, and we may need to constrain the criteria for eligibility for those programs to make sure that we can stay within our budget. So we expect to bring a balanced budget to you. If anything, we may do some spending out of surplus, but I would expect it to be very minimal with a plan to not continue that going forward. But yes, I'm with utility assistance, rental assistance, and general assistance. I have theories about what's going on, but I would say we are at an all-time high for all of those. Let's see, I do want to mention, so you can see the utility support, we're actually back up to 51. I think our highest was 59 in September of last year. The hotter it gets, the more we have to do that. Let's see. Oh, and I just wanted to highlight that we had the SMAS grant, which is a subrecipient grant with the city of Urbana. We did have some dollars left over. The focus was on rental assistance. We had some dollars remaining, and so we organized a food assistance event. We expected 50 immigrant families. We had 150 show up, 300 people in 3 hours outside of Township, wrapped all the way around the Township. I was surprised by that. It was large Spanish and French speakers. And we basically screened them for food assistance. And then we are providing gift cards to them with the remaining funds. So that was a fun event. I'm really glad that we were able to provide that. And we're providing $200 per household in assistance, which is what we had advertised. It was not a public advertisement. We sent it to 5 immigrant service partner organizations. It was a single email. And it was less than a week in advance, and we had 300 people show up. So just wanted to share that information in terms of the need that we're seeing in the community. That was a Champaign County specific event. Happy to answer any questions about the supervisor's memo or any of that I've shared with you. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one, excuse me. There's one other thing I wanted to share, which is, I know that the town board was engaged in the process of the Learman Avenue Garden. I know there was a lot of hope for that to become affordable housing. I too wanted to see that become affordable housing, and I know there was some issues with making that so. We have been working with the garden leader, and we're reestablishing a garden at Aspen Court. I think it's a really important community for us to serve with a garden. I was in touch with the mayor about partnering on an event later this year, and we're really trying to do a garden raising at that location. I think it would help with safety and a sense of community for us to have an event at that location, so I'm really looking forward to us doing that. There's many things I could highlight about Solidarity Gardens. It's been a really lovely season, but that one in particular I'm excited about.
Any questions? Okay. Move on to, I assume there's no unfinished business. Oh, Ivana, did you have a? No. Okay. New business. The resolution number T 2024-07-003R, a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an intergovernmental agreement with Champaign County Regional Plan Commission for rental assistance funds.
This is very simple. It's $15,000 from county ARPA dollars to help make up some of the gap that we saw in the rental assistance budget. I also just wanted to mention, I'm a little slow today, but we would usually have an end-of-year financial report for you, but because it's July 8th and the end of the year ended a week ago, and I've been out sick for 2 weeks, you will see the end of the year report next month.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move approval of resolution T-2024-07-003R, a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign an intergovernmental intergovernmental agreement with Champaign County Regional Planning Commission for rental assistance funds.
Second?
I'll second.
Moved
I
by,
believe that should have been "and" instead of "and," but
yes. That was moved by James, seconded by Jaya. Discussion? Therese?
Regarding the rental assistance, Danielle, I thought that I know that, we have, issue with, rent burden here in Urbana. What I want to understand is, how are we distributing rental assistance now?
Yeah, so any Urbana resident who lives inside the city of Urbana can come to our office to fill out an application for rental assistance. They do need to have sufficient income to maintain that. That might be a new job or last 30 days of payroll receipts. And essentially, they need to have not received rental assistance within the last 2 years from any of our partners. And they can receive up to 2 months of rent. Currently, we have not changed those rules or constricted it at this point. And they will have a determination within 30 days. If their landlord needs a letter prior to that, which they oftentimes do, we can let the landlord know via a template that we have that we are currently processing rental assistance, and that they can be in contact with us directly, the landlord, if needed, about the status of that case. Usually rental assistance cases, I'm not gonna promise that it doesn't sometimes take 30 days. It almost never takes 30 days. So if we have all the documentation in, which is the important part, we typically can turn it around within a week or 2 at the most.
Okay, so do those that apply for rental assistance, you're saying within 30 days, they get the assistance?
Correct.
Okay.
Their landlord is actually mailed the check, or we deliver it if we have any issues with the mailing system.
So what's the uptick lately regarding rental assistance?
Yeah, so if you look at the supervisor's memo, we actually, I've kept a track of it just because it's been pretty significant. So if you look, let's see, general assistance,
I
housing
did
support,
see
okay.
something.
So rental assistance, so we received 73 applications in June, up from 34.
Okay.
And we spent about $44,000 on 32 households, up from 27. And generally speaking, we've seen, we always see an uptick over the summer as people lose hours at the university. In fact, in one day, we had 5 applications from the U of I because a camp they thought was going to happen was not, and the food service workers were cut in their hours. I'd really like to see the university address that, because basically a lot of times we're picking up the pieces for folks who hire seasonally. So I would say summer is usually higher, especially around this time of year, but I would say it's unusually high. If you recall, basically we were very regular before COVID at about 12 assistance cases a month. So 10 to 15 was really where it sat. So having 32 households in a month is almost 2 to 3 times the number of assistance cases that we saw pre-COVID. And pretty much since the pandemic, we've had a higher rate than that. And again, we've held those rules, which is every 2 years, we screen very carefully around that piece. And so it really is new households that are seeking that rental assistance. And I would say overall inflation, utility bills, like people trying to pick which bill to pay off or which one they can get support with, and I would say we're seeing more higher income people applying for rental assistance. So I would say the working poor, those who fit in the ALICE category that the United Way talks about, the working poor who might have 2 jobs, folks who have had savings in the past and have drained down their savings. We're seeing more of that. And so we have kept to a 225% of the poverty level. We might need to drop that and cap it at a lower rate, and I am worried about those Alice households in terms of, being able to afford rent.
What do you think this is maybe due to, is it landlords raising rent? I've heard from a few people that landlords raising their rent $200.
Yes, I would say-
$150.
I would say all rents went up from between $100 to $300 more, probably averaging around $150 to $200 more. So we saw a big increase in the community. And then at the same time, we saw utility costs increase significantly. And those two things have really impacted residents. I would say, it would be worth looking at some of the unemployment stats. I know I've shared that with, if you go to Fred, which is out of St. Louis, it kind of tracks on a monthly basis the unemployment stats. And the last I looked, we did see we were had a decrease in unemployment pretty steadily, and then a recent, last 4 to 6 month increase in unemployment here locally.
Okay, thank you.
And, we have seen some large employers like Dart closed, and that's going to have consequences. I know Quaker Oats closed in Danville, as did the shelter there. So we saw migration to Champaign-Urbana as well. So there's, there has been, in some ways, some increase in precarity in those situations. And so I would say working people are they're feeling it.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colasetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before the Cunningham Town Board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think we have 1 minute before 7 o'clock, and we'll start the city council meeting. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the City Council regular meeting. It's Monday, July 8th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti,
Here.
Miss Bishop,
Here.
Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next item is approval of minutes from 3 previous meetings. That includes the June 10th, 2024 City Council minutes, the June 17th, 2024 City Council special meeting minutes, and the June 17th, 2024 public hearing minutes. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved by Mary Alice. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Chandra. Any substantial changes? Grace?
I just had a question about some of the continued meetings, that there'll be a separate minutes for that day of the same meeting. Is that correct?
No, so it'll be one set of minutes because it is technically one meeting. However, since we repost the agenda for the second day as a part of advertising to make sure that the public is aware that the meeting continued, we will post a duplicate copy of those same minutes to that posting as well. But it is one set of minutes for one meeting. We will note within the minutes, because we've had this before too, when we had like recessed meetings, when we had the goal setting sessions. So you will have the header where it has the pertinent meeting information and the roll call. And then after the first meeting is recessed or the first portion of the meeting is recessed, you will once again have that same header within the document with the new roll call on the new day, calling it back to order, reconvening it.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow. So there will be a separate set? Like I'm looking at, for example, on the 17th, seems like.
Correct. So on
it
the
was just
17th,
right?
there was one meeting that occurred on the 17th that was reconvened on the 18th. So it is one meeting, one set of minutes. It is one document that contains the material from both dates.
Because it looks to me like the 17th doesn't include the discussions on the 18th.
So the minutes that you have before you occurred exclusively on the 17th because there were like 4 meetings that night. So the committee of the whole, which is the meeting that was reconvened on the 18th, you do not have those minutes before you yet.
Okay, just wanted to make sure those were still coming.
Sure. Yep, they're coming. Actually, I just proved them today. They will probably be in next week's packet.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know why that wasn't getting in.
You're
Thank you.
totally fine.
Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Next item, there are no additions to the agenda.
And I don't know if this is the proper time to ask that item A be moved off the consent agenda for,
We'll do that after public input.
okay,
So when we get to the consent agenda, you can request that.
okay.
I think you won't be the only one. We'll move on to public input. If anyone wishes to address the council, please step up to the microphone and state your name for the record.
I'm Audra Owens, Secretary, North End United, and I would like to read a
Ma'am,
letter.
could you repeat your name? I didn't.
Audra, A-U-D-R-A,
Okay,
Owens, O-W-E-N-S.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I would like to read a letter that was sent from Richard W. Painter on behalf of Hope Village / Impact on Residents of North Urbana. To the Urbana City Council, although I now live in Minnesota, I am from Urbana and attended Urbana High School with the class of 1980. I grew up in Yankee Ridge and attended elementary school, middle school, and high school with children of families from all parts of Urbana, including the neighborhood affected by the planned Hope Village project. I returned to Urbana in 1998 to live on Douglas Avenue on Carl Park, and teach as a tenured professor at the University of Illinois College of Law before I left Urbana in 2005 to work as the chief White House ethics lawyer and then take a professorship at the University of Minnesota. I still care deeply about Urbana and the people who live there, including the people of North Urbana I went to school with, many of whom did not have the advantages I had growing up. I am now a government ethics lawyer. I write to you today about what I perceive to be a grave injustice to the people of North Urbana, many of whom are racial minorities who have been underrepresented in Urbana City, Champaign County, and Illinois state governments for decades. The Hope Village project is an admirable idea, although legitimate questions can be raised about the cost to taxpayers and the source of federal and state funds, as well as the role of the University of Illinois. The most serious government ethics problem, however, is the impact on the residents of the surrounding neighborhood whose voices have not been heard. Across America, controversial projects such as Hope Village are placed in predominantly minority neighborhoods because for state and local politicians, such is the path of least resistance. That is quite clearly what has happened here. I write to ask the Urbana City Council to take the time to give the residents of North Urbana a chance to be heard. Even though we have discussed this, we do feel like what we have stated has been ignored. On December 11, 2023, a letter was written to the Attorney General, letter about procedural violations, including a closed-door meeting of the Urbana Plan Commission that apparently did not qualify for any of the exceptions under open meetings law. And if you have this paper in front of you, you will see where you can go to read it or see it. A member of the United North End Group emailed the public access officer in the Attorney General's office on January 11th, 2024. She received a response letter on January 17th, 2024, saying that they had not yet determined if there had been a violation. I understand that. I understand there was a public hearing a few weeks ago, Urbana Committee of the whole meeting, and a statement of North End residents for the record that the neighboring residents' concerns have still, I'll repeat that one, the neighboring residents' concerns have still not been resolved in the development of Hope Village. I understand that today, July 8th, there is a meeting to approve the resolution to submit an application for more funding by July 31st, 2024. Approval of this resolution should be postponed. Urbana officials planning the Hope Village project not only have a legal obligation to comply with the state open meetings law, including those described in the letter to the Attorney General, but a moral obligation to represent the interests of all Urbana residents, including the historically discriminated against minority residents in North Urbana. The social problems of Champaign County and the state of Illinois, including homelessness and drug addiction, should not be foisted upon the residents of North Urbana simply because residents of wealthier parts of Urbana and Champaign County have the political pull to make sure a project such as this is not built in their neighborhoods. Please, at a minimum, give the residents who will be severely and adversely impacted by this project a chance to be heard. Respectfully, Richard W. Painter, S. Walter Ritchie, Professor of Law, University of Minnesota Law School, Guy Raymond and Mildred Van Voorhees Jones, Professor of Law, University of Illinois College of Law.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the Urbana City Council?
Pastor Melinda Carr, interim president of United North End Group. And I just wanted to reiterate the letter that was presented last week regarding the position of the neighborhood and the concerns regarding the proposal and the development of Hope Village, and that it's still our concern that traffic and access to Hope Village through Carver Park have not been fully addressed in the best interest of the neighboring residents, and other resolved issues still remain. Quoted the ordinance number, which is an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for a planned unit development. Plan case number 2476, that the final site plan is responsive to the concerns of neighboring residents, but it's not been responsive. We're asking that our concerns and recommendations will be taken care of. And so asking for the council to please consider postponing the decision to approve this application. Thank you.
Are there any other people who would like to speak to the Urbana City Council? Okay, we'll move on then to council input and communications. Grace?
Thank you. I'll just say that I agree with what Sharice had mentioned about pulling that item of coronavirus Hope Village grant from the consent agenda. I agree, and have another one I'd also like to move to the regular agenda. I appreciate those who've come out and shared some more thoughts with us tonight. And I appreciate reading the letter from Richard Painter that was on our list that would be read for sure because that had been asked. So I'm imagining that that's what the mayor had done with a little extra time, and appreciate you reading that letter for us. So thank you.
Any other council count? Sharice?
I just want to also thank the North End United for showing up tonight. And what I also want to reiterate is that this has been a thorn in our albatross, basically, on the North End, and since the proposal was even put on. And the issue is not, once again, not that we don't find that this is a commendable project. We're not against helping homeless. We're not against helping the very sick and fragile. But we don't like being foisted, having these types of things just foisted upon our community. And even though we have some kind of, we don't necessarily accept everything that somebody says, it has not been kind of disingenuous of Carl of how they've handled this situation. And I will continue to say that. And I think that they still need to, there's ways that they could actually reconcile this issue that they have regarding the Carver Park community that is just south of the parcel that they're building on. And they have chosen to not engage in any kind of compromise at all. So I want this to be, I want it to be on the up and up when I say that I cannot vote for this resolution.
Any other council comments? All right, we'll move on to, there are no reports from standing committees. We'll have the report from the Committee of the Whole. We'll be moving Resolution 2024-07048R off the consent agenda. Was there another one that you wanted to pull off?
Yes, I would also like to move item C, resolution number 2024-07-050R.
Any others? All right, go ahead, Grace.
Okay, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I present for approval resolution number 2024-07-049R, a resolution approving a professional energy consulting services agreement, Good Energy LP. Resolution number 2024-07-051R, a resolution approving a right-of-way license agreement with Experience Champaign-Urbana, an interpretive sign adjacent to 120 West Main Street. Also ordinance number 2024-07-025, an ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 23-93 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code requiring stop signs at a certain intersection, Melissa Lane at Mark Trail. Also, ordinance number 2022-07-026, an ordinance amending Schedule M of Section 23-190 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, towaway zones, Gregory Street north of Fairview Avenue. And lastly, resolution number 2024-07-052R, a resolution authorizing execution of an intergovernmental cost-sharing agreement for an Illinois Environmental Protection Agency-sponsored one-day household hazardous waste collection event.
There's a second.
Second.
Moved by Grace, seconded by Jaya. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next on the regular agenda, we have resolution, I'll move for approval, resolution number 2024-07-048R, a resolution of support for State of Illinois Community Development Block Coronavirus Grant CDBG CV.
And we have Grants Manager Braden Belcher here who can answer any questions.
Second.
Can we get a second, please?
Second.
It's moved by Grace and seconded by Chandra. Discussion. Did you have any extra information you needed to add, Braden?
Not at this time. There were 5 distinct questions that came out of last week's meeting that I have prepared answers for, so I'm happy to begin with that and provide those answers, or we can just open it up now.
Let's go with the answers first.
Okay, sure. So again, these were questions that came out of last week's meeting, and then also Councilmember Wu sent some follow-ups as well, so I've prepared answers to these, and then I'm happy to provide any further clarification as well. So the first question was about current funders for this project and amounts of funding that have been committed to Hope Village to date. Hope Village has to date secured funding from several sources, including a $7 million permanent supportive housing grant from the Illinois Housing Development Authority, a $1 million contribution from the University of Illinois, a $1 million contribution from Carle Hospital, and then the City of Urbana's ARPA contribution as well. Again, that's what's been secured to date. There is still a gap, so that is something that they are looking to continue to work on as they develop this project. The next question was in regard to timeline for this application. As was previously mentioned tonight, the application is due July 31st. DCEO is requiring that I mail the packet to them, so I'll actually need to mail it probably the week before that, but the deadline is actually July 31st to have that submitted to DCEO. In terms of finding out the funding decision, DCEO did not provide a formal timeline for that process. They did advise that the anticipated start date for grant agreements would be November 1st. If that date turns out to be accurate, the city would most likely be notified of a funding decision sometime in September. Again, that's an estimate, which means staff would be bringing this back to council for acceptance of the grant in mid-October in the event that we do receive funding through this grant application. The grant period, if this timeline is accurate, would begin on January 1st, 2025, and would go through December 31st, 2026. There were questions about whether or not the application materials, which are available for public view in the Community Development Department, could be made available online. This would be tricky because the application is being actively worked on by staff. So the documents are updated on a daily basis, and I wouldn't want to post incomplete or draft documents online. So we, like I said, we're happy to provide copies in office. If someone calls or emails, we're happy to print out the materials, the most up-to-date materials that day, mail them, or have them available for pickup in the Community Development Department. Again, we are actively writing the application, putting the materials together, so I would want to make sure we have the most up-to-date information to provide if someone asked. There were questions about potentially submitting a second application for another shelter project in Urbana. There is a lot of interest in expanding shelter access in Urbana. So I wanted to provide a little bit of context about this. really beginning back in April, staff started actively engaging with community stakeholders to determine what potential shelter projects in the community would be eligible for this grant and were shovel-ready. So there were conversations with stakeholders about, who could use this funding for shelter development. Given just the quick turnaround of the application, as well as the project readiness requirements from the state, the organizations that discussed, including the City of Champaign, declined to pursue this funding opportunity. So Hope Village was the last project standing, and just given where they are at in the development process, they were the most shovel-ready, which is a requirement of this grant. So it was determined that was really the best option. And then the last question was about the organizations that have committed to writing letters of support. We have received commitments from 5 organizations: Cunningham Township Supervisor's Office, Strides Shelter, See You at Home, Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, as well as Carl. Just to help clarify, again, because we are actively writing the application, I don't believe we've actually received those fully written letters yet. So once we do get them, obviously they will be made available for public review. We don't have them yet. But each of those agencies has committed to write a letter of support for this application and for the Hope Village project more broadly. So I believe I answered the questions that were submitted ahead of time, but again, I'm happy to open it up to any further clarification.
Any further questions for staff? Grace.
Thanks for the updates, Braden. Is it possible to email those same application materials?
Absolutely. I could email, again, they would be draft documents, and I do try to make that clear when I'm communicating, just that, it's the most updated draft that day, but certainly those could be emailed as well if that's requested.
Yeah, I think that would be more accessible for myself and maybe other members of the public. Do people email you if they'd like to see that day's update?
They can email myself, or they can also email grants@urbanaillinois.us. That's Urbana, Illinois, all lowercase, spelled out.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's all for now, thank you.
Other questions? Sharice.
Brendan, could you repeat for me the current funders?
Yes. So again, there was the approximately $7 million Illinois Housing Development Grant for permanent supportive housing that Carl received on behalf of Hope Village. $1 million contributions from the U of I, as well as Carl, and then the city's ARPA funding.
And that was $850,000?
Correct.
Okay, the other thing I'd like to know is, in the event that that there are no other applicants, Carl will receive the 1.2 million?
The city would be receiving the 1.2 million.
And then we decide if we're going to give it to Carl, or are we doing it in their behalf?
We're applying for the funding for this project specifically. So in the application, we are specifying that. So the city would serve essentially as a pass-through entity. We would be administering the funds, ensuring that all compliance pieces were dealt with appropriately, submitting quarterly reports and things of that nature to the state. But it would be for the Hope Village project.
Okay, so I guess my other question is, I know what their initial ask was $2 million with ARPA funds. Will this will bring them up to that $2 million, will it not?
We're applying for 1.2. That's what this application is for.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is that the
I'm sorry.
$850,000 that we
Sure,
already
yes.
gave them would bring them up to that $2 million, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Are they looking at any other funding from any place else? Do you know?
I do believe so. I do think they are. And again, as there's some fluctuation in terms of with inflation and prices, so that it could be the possibility that in the future they would need to go back and look for additional funding to meet any gaps that might come up as costs kind of fluctuate. But I believe right now this would fill the gap that they are projecting.
Does the city have any say-so at all about getting information regarding their funding for this project? Or any of the city council members?
I think yes, if it's from a state agency or the federal government, that would be public documents. If they have private funders, I don't think so, but any sort of government funding would be public information.
Okay, I'd like to have some information
Sure.
regarding that. And if you could send that to me. And I would also like to know why are they coming back? I guess the main question is what I want to know, why they're coming back to us asking us for money, but they don't pay property taxes. They already get a tax break from City of Urbana.
So this isn't local funds. It's actually federal funds that are coming through the state of Illinois. The best answer I can have is that they are coming back for additional funding because they have not secured all the funding yet that is required to build 30 homes plus the facilities that they are planning. So there's still that gap that they're still trying to fill.
Okay.
Grace?
Braden, could you clarify that this is with Hope Village, Inc., a newly formed nonprofit, not Carl? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that so far there has not been directly any Urbana taxpayer money that's contributed this project, right? It's been ARPA funds, federal money allocated through the city, and then this would be also not Urbana
Correct.
taxpayer money from the DCEO.
DCEO, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
And those have been the main funding sources
Correct.
through Urbana that have been indirect kind of through other
Correct.
sources. Okay. Thank you.
Chris?
Braden, do you know if the DCEO has mandated women-owned and minority-owned businesses to help build the housing?
Thank you for that question. The state does have procurement guidelines that we're required to follow that do require us. I would need to wait until we actually get an executed grant agreement because that's when they would actually spell out what those requirements would be. But yes, the state's procurement guidelines do require that they would employ women-owned and also minority-owned contractors, enterprises to complete the project.
Any other questions? Discussion? Grace?
Thank you. Trying to organize some thoughts here. So I think that, overall, the Hope Village tiny homes is a need of the community that we've established, and I'm glad to hear other service providers being supportive, especially of the use for this grant for this project. I also do take it very seriously, the process of hearing the public concerns on this issue. I have definitely been listening. I appreciate the continued input. I apologize that I did not reach out to those contact information at the bottom of the letter from last week, because I would really like to understand if there are some of these issues remaining. This letter addresses traffic and other unresolved issues, and I would genuinely like to know more, and I apologize that I didn't follow up with people this past week. As I've clarified some, trying to understand this process when we first approved the planned unit development, is that from what I'm seeing is that Hope Village has done a traffic study. They've made some accommodations with parking, not allowing parking on Carver Drive, addressed drainage, addressed the detention pond, considered mosquitoes in there, excessive noise from emergency vehicles has been addressed, construction traffic. They built a gravel road to access from the north to avoid any construction traffic on Carver Drive, added extra green space and landscaping that they plan to have between their facility and the neighborhood, working with Ameren to address infrastructure upgrades like streetlights, and willing to share some amenities that they'll provide at their facility. And I can absolutely understand if you still have concerns, and I'd like to know what those are specifically, if there's what these things are that haven't been addressed still. I also do see the facts, that's not in a threatening way, but the facts that a large apartment complex would be allowed there, and had been proposed and would have a much larger impact than these 30 homes that cap off Carver Drive to any future development. So I would like to hear more of the concerns if you feel that there are things that still need to be addressed. Again, I apologize for not reaching out, and people can feel free to contact me, G. Wilkin, at urbanaillinois.us. As far as this particular grant agreement in front of us tonight, I'm a little torn, a little disappointed that I wasn't able to see the application materials before now. So I still feel like I'm kind of going in blind on some of the details of the ins and outs of the funding. What's the budget? What's the need still? How is all of that kind of justified? I hear that we have that quick time limit here. Seems like unless we have a special council meeting next week, we're not going to meet again as council until August. So it seems like any timeline to try and delay, which I would be in favor of, kind of misses the window for this. And I hear you that we can reevaluate and accept the grant later or not, but I feel like if we're going to go through all the work of applying for it and we get accepted, I don't think it's likely that we're going to not accept it. So I'm feeling a little torn here. I wish that we had some more time to get some more information, but I also see that this is just allowing authority to apply for the grant, and then it may or may not be approved as far as DCOE, and then would come back to council for approval. So those are some of my thoughts, and again, I would like some more information if there are things that can be done to address some of the remaining concerns. Thanks.
Sharice.
Just going to help Grace out a little bit. More information regarding the transportation study that you're talking about, where there was a study done back in 2018, I think it was, because there was a joint venture that was going to happen between Champaign and Urbana called Union Gardens, and that particular joint venture fell through. But there was a traffic study done that actually regarding that being built, it totally put Carver Park out of the running for any traffic going through there. They would have to have gone down 5th Street or 4th Street in Champaign down to Kenyon Road and go up that way, or they could also access it going down Lincoln up to Federal Drive. And it would have been accessed that way because of the amount of traffic that would have been going through there. So there wouldn't have been any traffic going through Carver Park if that had been built, or probably if any other large community apartments or something like that were to be built on that parcel. So that's one thing that was never mentioned. So Carl is definitely not doing that community any big favors by putting, having Hope Village there, The other thing is that if you've not been to see that community and the quietness of that community, and you could see that any new traffic that goes through that community is more traffic than they're used to, and more traffic than they would have to that they would have to deal with. And many people park on Carver Drive. Many of the residents do park on the street itself. The other thing is that there were safety concerns regarding the detention pond, considering you can't put a gate around it or a fence around it or any of those particular things, and there are young children in the Crispus Attucks subdivision as well as Carver Park subdivision. And both of those concerns still have not yet been considered. How would you keep children from hurting themselves, possibly going in, kids will be kids. And the other thing is that, there was a proposal from North End United to actually flip the development so that the detention pond would be, instead of closer to Carver Park and Crispus Attucks, it would be north, on the north side. And those things weren't even considered. So there were several things that, and several issues that the community just wanted to discuss some kind of compromise, and we were basically told that just told that's how it was going to be, and they had addressed the issues, and because we didn't like what we heard, that's just kind of too bad. So that was basically the attitude. I don't know if you have any more questions. I'd be happy to. And there's some people here that also had to deal with Marty Smith and Claudia. Claudia, I can't think of her last name now, but Lynn Hoff, and you know, and what they felt was unfair treatment, or just not listening, not ignoring what their concerns were.
Any other comments? Grace?
Thank you. Just want to clarify that, to my understanding, there was a separate traffic study done for this project, so I'm not referring to an old one. Looks like Hope Village Project hired an engineering firm, Clark Dietz, that estimated that there would be 15 vehicle trips on Carver Drive during morning and evening peak hours, 15 cars a day in and out, was what this firm concluded. I'm not arguing for it, against it, vouching for it. Just want to clarify, I'm not talking about an old study. I'm talking about one that they did for this project recently.
No, I remember that.
And for the detention pond, I definitely recall that being an issue. And from my understanding, that's why they extended the fencing so that the detention pond is inside Hope Village that requires card access. And if that's still an issue, again, I'm open to hearing some concerns and possible solutions. But I also recall some things that did happen and that were changed in the plans to address some of these issues. And if they're saying that's still not acceptable, it's still not satisfactory, I'm open to that, but I absolutely will acknowledge the accommodations that have been made.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to let her know, I do remember them talking about that, but it wasn't genuine, I guess is the word I wanted to say.
Mary Alice?
I also remember a little bit of a discussion with the detention pond and putting a fence around it. You know, I sympathize with the neighborhood, the concerns about Carver Drive being the access. I was one of the people who really advocated for Union Gardens to have a separate entrance. I mean, I'll be completely transparent. The thing that really kind of swayed me with the access road had to do with the response time of emergency vehicles from Federal Drive. At the time, I think the amount of time in addition was 6 minutes, if I'm remembering correctly. And that was something that we couldn't get over. So it's difficult, but those are my thoughts.
Any other, might give the other people a chance. Any other comments? All right, one more.
Okay, but just to address your issue regarding the emergency vehicles, I drove that route from Carver Park down Bradley, Lincoln, taking Lincoln to Killarney, so on and so forth. I caught a light at Lincoln and Bradley. Okay, didn't catch one at Killarney and Lincoln, but I did get behind a truck that was pulling a trailer going about 20 miles an hour, and it took me about 6 minutes then to do that particular thing. When they said it would add 3 minutes, because that's what they were saying, you have the fire station that's right on, it's going to be on Goodwin and Bradley, and it's going to be on, right now it's on Lincoln. I didn't have lights and sirens, so yeah, it took me a while to get there. But when you have people that have lights, you have, you know, emergency, there really isn't a whole lot of distance between either of those, where those fire stations are going to be, and going around to Killarney, and you got lights and sirens. So I don't think it's going to add, I don't think it's going to be 6 minutes. I think it'll be more like 3 for response time. I say this because living in Ellis subdivision is about the same, it's about the same distance. So there's not a whole lot of difference in response time. And the fire department responds very quickly in Ellis subdivision. So I don't see that that would be a problem, actually. I don't think it would add any time. I think they made that up. I hate to say it like that, but I think that's what they did. Because there's not a whole lot of distance between where the fire station is now and then going straight down Lincoln and turning on Killarney to Kenyon Road. And then going and getting, when you have lights and sirens going, people get out the way and you don't have to stop for stoplights. So.
Okay. I think we'll have the clerk call the roll, please.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
No.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Present.
Mr. Quisenberry.
No.
We have 4 yeses, 2 nos, and 1 present, and that motion passes. And last item on the regular agenda.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, on the regular agenda, I'll present for approval Resolution Number 2024-07-050R, a resolution authorizing the execution of a service agreement with the lowest responsible bidder for the supply of electricity for residential and small commercial retail customers.
Is there a second? Sorry, Jaya. Moved by Grace, seconded by Jaya. We have Scott Tess.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tim McCowan, Public Works Director, and myself did receive 2 comments from Mayor and Council on this in the last week. And essentially, what those comments amount to is expressing a preference for first establishing some financial savings with our municipal electric aggregation efforts. Second, buying some renewable energy credits if there's enough savings to enough margin to buy some. And then third, to take a city fee to make the city whole on the time spent on this program. So those things in that order as the pricing might allow. That's the feedback we've received so far. So a couple of options to consider would include the resolution as it's written now gives the staff discretion and the mayor discretion to execute an agreement. We can take that feedback as part of our guiding efforts when we receive bids and have flexibility to make decisions. Or another option is to amend the ordinance tonight and to add some of those elements in as guardrails.
Council thoughts? Grace.
Thank you. Scott, I was trying to recap all of that. Not a very good auditory processor. So you're saying tonight we could amend the ordinance or go with it as is, and you have these unspoken guiding efforts?
Or I would say spoken, but not written, yes.
Yes, spoken, not written,
Yes.
unwritten. Was there another one too? Is this in some kind of procurement policy outside of the ordinance tonight, or no?
So there is a plan of operation and governance for all municipal electric aggregation programs. And the ordinance as written now is in accordance with that plan. That plan is not more specific than the ordinance as drafted. So it doesn't necessarily, lay out all those guardrails that you might imagine.
Would that be an appropriate place for them, or no?
That is also a possibility. In terms of what to do tonight, if you want to be more specific, I think it makes sense to amend the ordinance. And we can amend the plan of operation and governance anytime in the near future, according to how to match what the ordinance would say, and that would be kind of the guiding document going forward.
Okay, so you would recommend, if we wanted to codify it, put it in tonight's ordinance and work on the plan of operation and governance later?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And you said the feedback you got was to first get cost savings.
Yeah, the
Right.
priorities that were expressed were, first, get some cost savings with municipal electric aggregation supply contract. Second, if the margin of savings allows, buy some renewable energy credits. And then third, again, if the margin still allows, to take a city fee to make the city whole on its efforts.
And the consultant fee, is that considered in that first overall cost
That's our-
savings?
So that would already be baked in whether or not there is cost savings, because the consultant fee is kind of part of the deal. So there's a supply agreement plus consultant fee. That total there is what we're comparing against the price to compare. And for instance, if the supplier fee or the supplier price plus consultant fee is higher than the price to compare, the guidance that we're getting from mayor and council is to, walk away and go off of municipal electric aggregation for a cycle.
Okay. Oh, and because we miss it, like, there's not a second chance if we miss that
That would
cycle,
be
or?
that would be an instance where we're not able to generate savings, so we're going to back away, maybe come back to market on a different day, which could be within the calendar year before our contract expires, or could be quarter two next year. If we don't have a supplier contract that directly abuts our contract that's ending, then all of our residents get a letter saying, your contract is ended. You're going to be auto-enrolled in the Ameren price to compare unless you make some other choice, like selecting a different alternative retail electric supplier.
And then, I'm sorry, last one is, do you have any recommended wording for us in the ordinance tonight based off of the feedback you have?
Yes, based on those three things, I did draft some sentences that could be amended there and strike through, and I can pull that up.
Yeah, I would be curious to see your recommended language. Thank you.
So this would be those three priorities in order of preference. The subsequent are only possible after the prior are met and allowing for, further savings. So you wouldn't do all three unless you also had savings at the end of the day.
Any thoughts on that suggested language? Chandra?
I didn't have a question on the language, but to me, that's fine. So you said if there was no cost savings, we would leave the market and no changes would ensue, correct?
If there's no cost savings for the offers were provided in the next, say, month, our supply contract for all of our residents would expire at the end of 2024, and the end of December, and our residents would go off of the price that we've had for 2 years, and they would be auto-enrolled in the Ameren. Well, it's called the Ameren price. It's the state of Illinois secured price to compare, and they'd be auto-enrolled into that with the option of choosing in each household by household their own retail electric supplier, or staying on the default electricity supply price.
And typically, is that price, like, our bill's going to be higher or the same, or what is your?
So we know what the price to compare is through, it's the summer rate right now. I think it's through September. We know what it is now through September, and then the non-summer rate hasn't been posted yet, so we don't know what it is just yet. But all we can do is compare to what's posted now.
Okay.
You know, just like market prices are good to the end of the day. When the state of Illinois goes out and buys big blocks of electricity to push through Ameren and ComEd at no markup, those prices are only secured for a few months. That's the default price for a few months. So when you sign a 2-year supply agreement, you're trying to project out into the future what you otherwise would have paid through the price to compare.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mary Alice.
Is it true that typically the summer months are higher in terms of electrical rates and the winter months are lower? Is that generally true?
I don't know the answer to that. I've started in this process the last couple of months. I did start plotting a bunch of historical data. I'll have to take a look, but I'm not sure.
All right, thank you.
Grace.
Thank you. I do plan to move to this amended language here, and I just had a few little things for Scott on the wording here beforehand, if I may. I would think about on C, changing shall to may. And if there's some way to think about this being the lowest priority to have that in there, like saying if we're expected savings after the purchase of renewable energy credits would be eliminated or significantly reduced, maybe to add that by such a purchase. Because just what I'm thinking of here is, say hypothetically, residents would only be saving 0.1 cents per kilowatt hour anyway, and this says shall, like this, you're obligated to have it in there unless it completely eliminates any energy savings. But it seems like, for me in that situation, I would rather have residents save 1 penny if that's the only thing they're going to save than that go to a city fee.
I think what you're saying it makes perfect sense. As a practical matter, we wouldn't eliminate savings all the way to the point of 0.000001 in order to squeeze one more fee. Where the cutoff is, I don't have a number. But yeah, I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah,
it does make sense.
What I see the way it worded here doesn't really give you that option. It says you shall implement it unless it's completely eliminated.
Fair, yeah.
So that's why I'm trying to not put you in that situation that sounds like that's not what any of us are wanting. It's a goal. So that's why I would suggest change shall to may, and maybe we could say be eliminated or significantly reduced by such a purchase. It's still a little vague, but it at least gives you that little bit of wiggle room to define what is significantly reduced.
And maybe the same for item B as well. Is you may not necessarily want to buy RECs if you swallow up all the margin of savings to the point of 0.000001.
Yeah, you want to say eliminated or significantly reduced in B? I kind of like the shall for that one.
In both instances, it's somewhat to that point. There's language of or some lesser proportion in order to get at that a little bit. So there may be a scenario where there's some margin of savings. If we buy 100% of renewable energy credits, we swallow it all up. So we're, some lesser proportion would be we'll buy 50% and leave some reasonable margin of savings.
Yeah, and I say that I like keeping it shall because that is what we've established as one of the higher priorities, that cost savings, renewable energy credits, and then the city fee. So I think it would make sense to keep B shall and make C may, since that's our lower priority. So, do I still have the floor? May I move to amend this ordinance to include the language shown here with the discussions we've had about eliminate or significantly reduce, and a may on C.
Does the seconder agree? That's you, Jay.
Second, yes, good.
Okay. Further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. All right, that concludes the items on of business. Thank you, Scott. We'll move on to, we have no reports from special committees, reports of officers, none tonight. 2 items of new business. One is resolution number 2024-07-053R, resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Savoy for the temporary usage of an aerial platform ladder truck. And
I'm going to speak to it, and then Interim Deputy Fire Chief Clint Weidert is here to answer any technical questions that you might have.
Okay.
I wanted to lead off by saying that this is a time-sensitive request, and we hadn't finalized the details in time to come to the Committee of the Whole. So we're hoping that you have enough information between what's in the memo and any questions that you might ask Chief Weidert that this could move forward. But we're prepared if you want to send it to committee that we have a plan B that we could that will tide us over. So. A month or two ago, you had passed a budget amendment that contained an item for fully funding the repair to 261, and now we're in the happy position with the generosity of the Savoy Fire Department that they have offered us the use of their ladder truck to substitute for the ladder truck that we're sending off to Pennsylvania to be repaired. And the details of that agreement for what they don't expect any kind of financial compensation for this, but they do expect us to give them some response in exchange. And so that's what you have before you in terms of the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Savoy, or the Village of Savoy, and then the resolution would authorize the mayor to enter into that agreement. And as I said, Clint is here to answer any technical questions that you might have.
questions for Carol or Interim Deputy Chief Weidert? Chandra.
In the memo, it says, where did I just see it? Local response times may be lengthened. So does that mean the truck will stay in Savoy? And then,
No, the truck will not stay in Savoy. The
so
truck will
it'll
be,
be here.
I'm trying to remember
Up to
which
the table,
station it's going to operate out of. Yeah, you couldn't avoid it.
And just push the button on the microphone.
Okay, I'm here now. Hello. Sorry.
Question about, it says response times may be lengthened, so will the truck be here in our station?
Yes, it'll be housed in Urbana Fire Station.
Okay, I just wondered why it says the response time may be lengthened during this period.
In the agreement?
It's in the memo. It says, under the impact on core services.
I can speak to that a little bit and let
Go ahead.
Clint catch up. The idea is if we're responding in Savoy, then that might mean that a backup needs to come instead of being in the response area of that vehicle. So, but there's a whole protocol in the agreement about how Savoy basically, if they get there first, if we're responding, they get there first. Depending if it's not a working fire, then we just go back. Our folks just go back to the station. If there is a working fire, then there's a protocol for who's in charge, who gets there first, and then who takes over, and all of that. So if we are responding in a situation that would be not typically be a mutual aid situation, that would take us out of the city of Urbana temporarily while we're responding in Savoy, and that's the nature of that.
Oh, so like coming back from
Yes.
a situation in
Yeah.
Savoy.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
James.
Can you just give me an overview of the insurance situation while we're using their truck? Are both entities considered self-insured, or do we have insurance for this vehicle, or do they have insurance for the vehicle?
I don't know the answer to that. I can get you the answer to that.
Mary Alice.
I thought I read that the insurance is something that we would provide a copy that we've fully insured, but I could be wrong. I don't know if you.
Yes, that was one of their requests, that we show that it's insured. It's essentially as if we owned it.
So with that, I mean, to James's question, does that mean that we go out and purchase insurance for this particular vehicle and then show the certificate to the Village of Savoy?
I honestly don't know that answer. If that's what they require, that was something that was presented to me that it was covered.
Okay. So if I can summarize exactly what's going on here, our ladder truck is unavailable, right?
Say again.
Our ladder truck is unavailable to do
Correct.
repairs. Savoy has generously agreed to let us borrow they're not charging us to borrow it, correct?
Correct.
And the only thing in return is that we have to provide it with our firefighters if there's a working fire in Savoy. Is that right?
During the time of our use,
Yes.
we will be providing an Urbana fire unit to any call within the Village of Savoy.
Okay. Thank you.
Just for the public's information, item 8 in the agreement covers insurance.
Mhm.
Spells out. Any other questions? Is there a motion? Sure, go ahead.
It says 6 to 8 weeks, and we know how sometimes maintenance and stuff can go. Like, if it goes beyond an 8-week, is Savoy okay with that? Is that?
Yes, they have agreed to,
Till the truck is returned,
right,
essentially.
when ours comes back, unless there's an unforeseen circumstance, they would need it back, then it's written in the agreement of how that would happen. But yeah, they're of the understanding if it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever, they're good with that.
Okay, thanks. With that, I'll make a motion. Move for approval resolution number 2024-07-053R, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Savoy for the temporary use of an aerial platform ladder truck.
Is there a second? Moved by Chandra, seconded by Mary Alice. Discussion. Grace.
Sorry, I forgot a question that came up. With this extra insurance of $1 million liability, will that have any cost that isn't foreseen in the budget? Is that just a drop in the bucket in all of our other insurance policies, or is there some cost associated with that?
I don't know if there's a cost specifically associated with that, but all the costs that we need to effectuate this repair are covered in money that has been budgeted and approved by council.
Any other questions? Will the clerk please call?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Chief.
I'd just like to, on behalf of Urbana Fire Department, say thank you to everyone for this, and more importantly, the citizens. We're very appreciative of this. I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Savoy, yes. The city administrator and I had the opportunity to visit 261 before it left on its trip for Pennsylvania, so. Last item on the agenda is an appointment to the Human Relations Commission, and this is for Jerry D. Fry, for a term ending June 30th, 2027. Mr. Fry is a 20-year resident of Urbana, self-employed accountant and tax return preparer. He has a bachelor's degree in accounting, passed the CPA in 1977. He has extensive experience in public accounting, managed his own CPA practice. He's worked locally for a real estate management firm for 13 years, dealing with international accounting teams, has managed a public golf course with 15 employees, and he serves as a fund trustee at his local church. In his application, he stated, I'm very interested in real equal opportunities for all classes of people, whether that be in employment, housing, access to credit, or public accommodations. I'm certain this can be a complicated and messy situation from time to time, but in my opinion, a commission like this is necessary to maintain equilibrium in a sometimes unjust society. I'm eager to learn how this commission operates and eager to be an active member, not just an attender. So we're very happy to bring this appointment to the City Council for your approval. And I will say this is one of the commissions I believe has 9 seats available. So this helps us. We still will have a couple vacancies, but we're getting closer to filling all the seats on this commission. So I would ask for a motion. Mary Alice.
I will move to approve the appointment of Gerald D. Fry to the Human Relations Commission for a term ending in June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. That's concludes new business. We'll move on to the discussion item, which is the Alternative Response Task Force, and I'll get it kicked off. The council has received an email on Friday, I believe we mailed that out. But as the public and as you all know, the city is seeking to develop and implement an alternative response model for some calls for service that are currently handled by both the Urbana Fire Department or the Urbana Police Department. This next phase, and the next phase of the community safety review that's been underway for the past couple of years, being conducted by Barry Dunn Consultants, will focus on the establishment of a task force to explore alternative response models, and that will be followed by recommendations for implementation. So the next order of business for the public safety review will be the formation of the task force. We've had a phone call with Michelle Weinzettel, the consultant with Barry Dunn. We've received suggestions, recommendations from a number of members of the community and community stakeholders. The purpose of as explained to us by Barry Dunn, and they will be the ones guiding the work of the task force. That's part of what you hired them to do. It's important that the task force includes members of the community with expertise in specific areas that are essential to this alternative response model. So folks with expertise in mental health, dealing with mental health issues, behavioral health, emergency services, various community services such as housing, domestic violence, dispute mediation, many of the areas that are ideal for an alternative response model to be established for them. So what hoping to come out of, so what the council has received is a draft list compiled from the various input that we've received over the past week and a half or so, with areas of expertise plus proposed organizations or stakeholders. And this is just for the purpose of beginning the discussion. If you'd like, we could read the list. This wasn't in the packet, so I think for the community's sake, we should read the list and the proposals. And again, this is just to begin the conversation. There may be organizations you want to keep on the list, replace, remove. The consultants recommend that the task force be kept fairly compact. This is bigger than what they recommended, but I think we have a lot of interest in the community, so we should start out. It'd be all right to start out. Anyway, the Proposed service areas of expertise include behavioral, mental health, and a suggested organization and stakeholder for that area would be OSF Heart of Mary Medical Center. They do the inpatient psychiatric services, and they also have an emergency services as well, and they are very actively involved in caring for people. Emergency services provider, Carl Foundation Hospital Emergency Department. In general community services, particularly housing, but many different types of services, Regional Planning Commission, the Community Services Division. In the mental health field, the Champaign County Mental Health Board, Township Services, Cunningham Township, with behavioral health and addiction recovery services, Rosecrans, domestic violence, Courage Connection. In the area of child sexual or physical abuse, there's the Champaign County Children's Advocacy Center. We also received suggestion for general child, family growth and development, the WELL experience, sexual assault, abuse, harassment, the rape advocacy, counseling and educational services or RACES, expertise in dispatch, that would be METCAD for Champaign County, dispute mediation and resolution, Dispute Resolution Institute, expertise in reentry services, first followers. There was in thinking about this, probably another area we ought to be looking at is immigrant services, considering the large immigrant population we have in Urbana. And there are a number of organizations serving immigrants, including New American Welcome Center, Refugee Center, and several others. And then the city of Urbana would have representatives on the task force as well, representing Department of Community Development Services, the Urbana Fire Department, Urbana Police Department, and Urbana City Council. So that's the list to start with tonight, and we welcome feedback, suggestions. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, the Champaign County Christian Health Center is moving to Sunnycrest, and they wanted to be considered on the task force since they do provide free services, medical services to the poor, and deal extensively with the issues of the poor.
And I will say Champaign-Urbana Public Health District was also a suggestion. So. Jael.
Yeah, thank you. I will state that I do have a conflict of interest with one of the organizations that's listed, which is Rape Advocacy Counseling and Education Services, not Educational Services. I think overall, though, this is a solid start. I think trying to keep it as small as possible is the challenging piece. The OR for either the Children's Advocacy Center or the WELL experience, we were briefly speaking before town board meeting, I think even though we need to be mindful about size, those are very different organizations. And I also think one of the things that especially the WELL would bring to this group is an organization that's specifically focused on serving Black and brown members of our community. And considering that the initial intent of this was to have a racial justice and equity lens, I think that if they have capacity, they would be a good fit. I think there are other organizations that, you know, could fill that niche as well if the WELL experience is not available. But I do think that both of those agencies, the Children's Advocacy Center and the WELL experience, are not comparable. And so I think if there's space for both, that would be appropriate.
Chandra.
I would also consider maybe adding CU Trauma and Resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
And also a question, so would it just be one representative from each of these organizations on this task force?
The idea.
Okay.
Yeah. And included in what was sent to you, there was a suggested schedule from Barry Dunn as far as the meeting schedule, and they want to keep this. It's pretty. it's a pretty, I won't say ambitious, well, it is ambitious. You know, they want to get this going and they want to keep it moving along. And I think people have waited long enough, so we're on board with that. Obviously, it's not going to happen, the first meeting won't happen at the end of July, given that we're midway through July. And once you're settled with the organizations you'd like to invite, then it's a question of reaching out and asking people to participate. So we're not guaranteed that everyone will say yes on this either. Yeah, oh, Sharice.
Reverend Dr. Underwood would like to say that the Ministerial Alliance should be included in this list as well.
Chris?
I was provided feedback from the community, and there was great concern that adequate African-American representation be on the task force. And I'm sure we're intending to do that, but they want, people were wanting to emphasize that and make sure that happens.
Yep. Mary Alice?
So I have 2 points. The first one is that I understand that there's been a lot of discussion in terms of the alternative response model with mental health, with substance abuse, and that's clearly reflected here in the list. But, you know, alternative response is more. And I say that because there could be an opportunity for the city to consider a different type of response for smaller things that don't have a time and propensity for violence. Meaning, so for example, if somebody needed to go and take a report for graffiti on a building, that's not something that has to be addressed immediately. It's not something where there might be somebody there who's going to be violent. And I'm not trying to enlarge this because I have another question about how large this is getting. So I just wanted to kind of pose that to city council members, thinking about like making it a little more broader. What is alternative response, or what are some of those things? I don't know if this set of people would be able to address some of those. So I'm wondering how city council would feel if there was city staff who looked at some of that stuff and gave a recommendation to city council that probably would include staffing. So for example, we have Jason Aerosmith, who goes around and gives ordinance violations if you leave your garbage can out too long, and I'll go home and put mine on the curb when I get home tonight. So I just wanted to pose that question. And then the second question that I had was, given that this is probably over 20 people, which is a lot of people, I'm trying to figure out how that's going to be a productive conversation so that people's voices can be heard, and still also ensuring that there is a diversity of voices. So I don't know if Barry Dunn had an idea on how they would be able to facilitate such a conversation, given that they had suggested that it be much smaller.
The original suggestion was for 10 to 12 people. But also, as we talked about it, there's opportunities in between, and for the group, the task force itself, to meet once a month for the next 4 or 5 months. But in between, there's opportunity then for task force members, I would think, to then be able to solicit input from the community, to meet. That's where you do some of the community engagement that people really want to see happen with this as well. So it's not just going to, all the activity isn't going to just happen at the monthly task force meetings, as I understand it. But again, this is going to be guided by Barry Dunn. So this, we're not, the city isn't going to be running this. This is guided. We'll be facilitating, but consultants will be running this.
Well, given that we have 8 people up here, and we sometimes take several hours to go through things, if we have 20 to 25 people on this task force, I am concerned.
Well, then, happy to take suggestions. Sandra.
It's tough to say who to take off, but I think is there any duplication here? Like, is there any, I don't know, Regional Planning Commission, for example? Like, I know they work with the homeless population as well, but so does Township. Like, is that a duplicate? Like, would Township be able to bring in the word of like all the service providers and one of them being Regional Township? You know what I mean? Like, Township sits on so many boards or whatever, and so they could bring that voice in and maybe eliminate one or two. That's just my suggestion.
Carol?
I was in the conversation with the mayor. This may help you, may not. I'll just toss it out there. I think what Barry Dunn is trying to get to is a recommendation about what alternative responses can look like for specific calls for service. And in doing that, I would say there's a pragmatic aspect to it, right? They want to know, like, who's going to do it? How is it going to happen? So it's very much focused not on ideas, but on ideas that are implementable. So there's people on the list that are capable of joining if they have the capacity and the interest as being part of the alternative response. And then I think there's people on the list who might want to inform but not necessarily participate. So I don't know if there might be a follow-up conversation with Michelle about is there sort of an opportunity for people who wouldn't necessarily be involved in the actual response for any given type of call for service, sort of as a different kind of opportunity, you know, like after the recommendations come from Barry Dunn, and then we have to talk about actual implementation. That might be a way. But I think what I got out of it was this is very much about creating something that is tangible and implementable for us, and that's why the focus is on people who could potentially participate in the alternative response.
Maybe a way to look
However
at
that's
this
worked.
would be the potential responders in one pot, and then the resources informing the creation of the model in another bucket. Yeah.
I guess what I want to understand, because this is a very long list of people, if maybe instead of, because we seem to have so many services that overlap and so on and so forth, if maybe instead of there just being one group of 20, we have, we could get suggestions from actually two different groups, especially considering there are issues on one side of town that do not affect another side of town at all. And you could probably, to me, get more information and more a better overlook at how they're the alternate response team, so to speak, could work for the entire city if we don't just have the same 10, folks on one whole thing. I think we actually need to have, I hate to say it, but two different types of I know I'm making it more complicated, and more work, but this wasn't my idea. Anyway, it to be fair and to recognize the simple fact that there are areas of Urbana that do not have the same problems, the same issues that other areas of Urbana have. And what I've noticed in the past couple of years is that we seem to be covering certain communities with the same paintbrush, and that is not how Urbana is. Urbana is diverse in all kinds of ways, and so there are certain communities that suffer greatly from a lack of services, and other communities that that have too many services. So what I'm thinking is that we need to mix it up a little so that everybody can hear the different sides of what people think alternative response means, and so that we can come to something, a consensus of sorts, that will help be broad enough to help everybody in Urbana and not just this community or this community or this community. It actually, if we have to kind of cut it up and have two different folks, two different times or two different something, so that, at least two, so that we can hear what the different services, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't know about all of these services that everybody's named off. I don't know what they all do. I don't know how they all interact with the community. I can say that much on an honest level. And I think that if we get that kind of out, then we can say, oh, and then we can determine like who's gonna be on the alternative response. I think it'll be easier to suss that out, because there won't be any duplication and everybody can kind of come to a consensus. If you have two different, and in conjunction with different council members, so that they can also hear that kind of, what's going on, or what different services think should be offered, and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, I just made everything a little bit more
I think,
work.
I think I understand what you're saying, but we do need to keep in mind, we really need one task force that works on a model that will serve the whole community. That's the challenge. And that the kind of information that you're saying that is important for them to have, I think can be solicited through the work of the task force.
So then we end up with one task force with 20 people on it.
Well, or smaller.
But that's just it. It's like right now we don't even know how to begin to cut down that list of people. And yes.
Grace.
Thank you. I would recommend that we keep one group, that we not eliminate any of these unless you think there's a really good justification. I would recommend that we cast a wide net in starting as far as planning, as Carol helped articulate, that some of these organizations or representatives may be involved in the actual response. Some might be advisory, informing it. I think it's okay to cast a wide net. As far as timing, I think that a quickly run meeting with people speaking concisely can move along faster than a smaller group not operating that way. So I think there are some variables outside of just the number of people on how the meeting's handled. I was trying to find the contract with Barry Dunn. I didn't recall this being part of the plan. I think it's making sense now that you're saying this is part of their recommendation as far as alternative response includes creating this task force, is what I think I'm hearing. I just wasn't super clear on that. I do have some concerns that Barry Dunn may already have some ideas in mind on what's possible or what are limitations coming into this, and I do really want this to be community-focused and community to have input without pre-existing biases coming in. As far as types of response, as Mary Alice's point about it could be some reports, it could be, and to point out that the city's already on the task force. I think there's already that representation. And for me, the bigger priority is things like mental health crises or avoiding some of these discrepancies that we have in how people are treated and how things are responded to. That those are the really important life-changing situations, more than just logistically coming to take a report, I think is important, and it could help with efficiency, but for me, that's absolutely not my highest priority or motivation for going into this. I would also really like these meetings to be open or public, have them recorded and posted online. I think every single meeting should be recorded and posted publicly. I'm also wondering what some next steps are. Council needs to approve the board members of this task force. I feel like we need a little more details here. I hope that this discussion is not the extent of council's involvement in where this is going. So I'm curious about next steps, and I absolutely think all these meetings need to be recorded. I'm not sure if we have a process in doing that, making some kinds of policies going into this, or how we're setting this up. But yeah, I still have some questions on how we're proceeding from here.
Any other comment? James?
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging trying to build something and take in as many perspectives as possible. I would just say, from a standpoint of what may be a working group, a smaller group of people makes sense, but that doesn't preclude us from having a group of interested parties that can participate in the ideation of what this looks like. And so I'm making it more complicated by saying that, but if we need to have a smaller team that does the work, I would suggest that we have a broader team that can provide input to the work, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Jay?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I had the opportunity to serve on a governor's task force for the state, and it was a larger group, and then there were working groups within that had specific tasks to work on. So I think that is it can be an effective model.
Well, if you cast a large net to begin with, and this isn't to say, these are suggested organizations, it may be that not everyone has the ability to serve on a task force. So the first step, as far as the next step, would be if you want to keep the list as it's been articulated and added to, we can reach out to folks to see if they're available for their organization to participate as the next step. And that might eliminate a few. Yes?
I just wanted to basically say that having working groups within this larger one, I think is a good plan. I just don't know how, with Michelle's outline, how that would be worked in. I see some very clear groupings between mental health, behavioral health, medical, and substance abuse as being a very clear niche. Another one is trying to address some of the groups that maybe have been not treated as well. I guess I'll just say that. There's dispute resolution and rape advocacy, Courage Connection. So I can kind of see this going into 2 or 3 groups of people. That said, there needs to be a representative from the city in some of these areas. So I'm not sure how to really flesh that out, but I do agree having a working group could make a lot of sense and make it easier to accomplish its goal.
Jan?
I think this has already been said, but just to reiterate, as we're looking at the composition of the working group and then also thinking about potential task force, making sure that we're thinking about diversity in a lot of ways, but especially focused on racial diversity. And I think that can be part of the guidance to organizations that we're reaching out to, too, is to ask them to be mindful about that.
So it's possible we could schedule a quick phone call with Barry Dunn to kind of run this past them to see what their thoughts are and how we might organize with this somewhat larger group. And then is it your wish to have a resolution approving a specific list, or are you all right coming to a consensus? And I don't see this group actually convening until August. So the original July schedule is just not realistic. So, Chandra.
Does it need to be a resolution, or can you just bring the list and say, this is the list, do you approve or not approve, I guess?
If you're okay with that. We'll have one meeting next week, and then we won't meet again until August 3rd, so. Okay. All right, we'll run this by Michelle and see what she thinks. And so this is a very inclusive list, I think. Take it from there. Thank you. And last but not least, we will need to go into closed session per ILCS 120/2C21, and that's for the purpose of reviewing closed session minutes. So we'll need a motion and a vote to go into closed session, and then just for folks who are here in the audience, we will adjourn immediately after we come out of closed session, so there will be no more business after that.
I move we go into closed session for the stated Open Meetings Act reason.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
That motion passes. I'll need a motion for us to come back into open session.
Motion to come back in open session.
Second.
Moved by Sharice, seconded by, Mary Alice. All those, do you need a roll call? Roll call, please.
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans? Ms. Hersey?
Yeah.
Ms. Colasetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
That motion passes. And the council reviewed the minutes from closed session and came to a conclusion by consensus that none of the minutes would be released at this time. And with no further business before this body, we are adjourned.